And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the Black Heights Podcast, where our vision is prepare African Americans for upward mobility in management and leadership positions around the world. We do this by training, coaching, and exposing them to top-level business professionals and executives. Tonight, we have a special podcast where we'll be speaking to Mr. David Evans and talking to him about his journey. Now, one thing that many of my viewers will notice is that my guest is an African American, and there's a reason for that, and that is diversity. And we'll be talking about a lot of that tonight. In corporate America, if you climb the ladder, and you have to be able to work with people of all different backgrounds, and also learn from people that aren't like you. So, in fact, statistics show that the majority of African Americans that do make it at top level in CEO positions are sponsored by somebody outside of their race. Top level positions aren't filled with African Americans, and you have to really learn how to rub shoulders with other people that aren't like you. So here's a quick story. I went to my company's holiday party this last Friday. I was rubbing shoulders with everybody in my company as well as their spouses as well. And the next morning, my wife and I recap what was the night was like and the conversations that was had and the people that she enjoyed speaking with. And initially that night, I didn't notice that I was the only African American in the room because it isn't something that I noticed with at the time. But the next morning when we had the recap, I did notice that. And one thing I would say is that I didn't feel a certain way. I felt in my place because I am a professional. And that's what corporate America is about. It's about being professionals and about competition. So I think in a previous podcast or two, we talked about the black unicorns. I'm an example of a black unicorn. So let me get off my rant. Let me do a quick introduction of Mr. David Evans. David Evans is the mechanical engineer. He has his bachelor's degree and his master's from Georgia Tech. He has an MBA from Georgia Tech. He works at AFT. He's a real estate investor. He's a Jordan shoe collector, and he's also a soap maker. Welcome, my friend. How are you, David?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. So let's jump into this. Mr. Evans,
Yes.
there probably are some nerves, but let me help with those nerves and have you introduce yourself to the people in the audience and tell everybody where you're from.
David Evans. I actually grew up, I'm a Georgia boy. I grew up in middle Georgia, Macon, Warner Robins, as well as in Savannah. I've been here in Atlanta now. Living in Atlanta, I've been here probably 18, going on 19 years. So it's all still kind of home. It's all really local and kind of the whole state is kind of local and home to me. So
Very good.
that's that.
Tell people how you grew up too, Dave. What was your family like? Your family structure.
How did I grow up? That's you know it, when I think about how I grew up, there's a couple different ways I could tell that story, right? And I could tell the story of I grew up in a divorced household with a single mother who worked two jobs. Dad wasn't around, and all of that would be true. The reality is, though, that I grew up with divorced parents, and the dynamics of that are it's a divorced household, and families are complex. So, but I grew up in a middle class suburban area of Middle Georgia. I went to a good school. My mom was she was a hardworking woman that worked for the government.
Mm-hmm.
She put herself through college. She ended up getting her master's as well as her bachelor.
Yeah.
My father was a blue collar electrician, and he lived also in the Middle Georgia area. So, I grew up, I think, with solid parents that taught me the fundamentals of hard work and just, if you want something, work for it and get it, and don't let anyone tell you you can't. So.
Right on. Right on. Let's do this. We got some people in the chat. I forgot to do this when we started off. Let's make this thing interactive. Please chat your questions, anything that is of interest that comes to you. We got Mrs. Tiffany Wade in the house. We also have Mr. Curtis Lane in the house. Tiffany says hi. My man Curtis Lane says, my man Dave, cognac sipping and swag dripping. Real Georgia.
I know Curtis really well.
All right. So you talked about, you grew up in a diverse, a divorced household. Your mother and your father really taught you what hard work was, and education was very, very important to you because your mom got her master's, and she was able to graduate from college as well. Talk about what education you have, Dave, and how important was education to you growing up?
Education growing up, it's interesting. High school in Georgia, I think it's really an area that lacks a lot of attention. I went to a really good high school in Houston County, and my mom had two rules. I want you to play a sport, get involved, and graduate with honors. That's all she asked. And so, as any high school kid, I did just enough to get by, right? Graduated with honors, played a sport that, so made her happy, got me through. And then, I went to college, and it was a lot tougher than high school.
Yeah.
And I took some AP classes, and they weren't called AP classes, but I took some advanced classes in high school. But you get to college, and you realize, okay, the competition's a little thick out here, so put a lot more effort. And Georgia Tech is, I don't think that the curriculum itself is difficult. I mean, any engineering curriculum is difficult. But I think what really makes the school difficult is that it's located in the heart of downtown Atlanta, midtown Atlanta. And any college kid will tell you, if you go to a lot of really big colleges, they're in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yep.
You look at Alabama, but you take a school like that and you're in the heart of a city, and you learn really quick about juggling and time management. So I took for my bachelor's, don't judge me, but I took every bit of 10 years to get my bachelor's.
Yep.
And I worked a full-time job through college. I was fortunate enough to have gotten on with before, early in my education, I got on with a engineering company and worked full-time for them as a technician, and kind of really learned some of the hands-on aspects of working. And I worked in a lot of pulp mills and paper mills and things like that around the state.
Yep.
And so my undergrad kind of became not really a part-time job, but it wasn't the traditional lifestyle of a freshman at Georgia Tech. Right? I didn't live on campus. I had an apartment out right across from campus. I walked in, but I never actually lived in the dorms, so I didn't have that type of lifestyle. But after I got my undergrad, I found that there were some struggles that came with taking that kind of time to finish that undergrad. I was a little behind the eight ball in comparison to the competition out there for jobs. And I realized that I had to go back. And that's when, after some years in the field, doing some sales work, doing some engineering work, doing some project management work, I really decided to go back and get my master's, and had the opportunity to go back to Georgia Tech, part of their executive program.
Yep.
And I went through that program in 18 months, which, is 18 months compared to 10 years. It's a very drastic change. But the program was great. I learned a lot from it, met a lot of great people, and the networking was probably one of the biggest takeaways.
Absolutely. Tell us what that struggle is like, Dave, of taking spending some time taking your bachelor's or getting your bachelor's degree, and then getting out of school and going directly into your master's a couple years later. What was that experience like? And I guess talk to us about that struggle of after graduating and having to figure out, you mentioned something about you was behind the eight ball. Talk about that struggle there and how the decisions that you made to go back to school to get you to where you are today.
Well, so if you can kind of, I guess, to set the scene a little bit, I had been, whenever I got my degree, I had already been at the point where I'd had 7 years experience roughly doing engineering work. You get through the basic core, and then I'd had all the hands-on technical side, and then I'd got on with a company here locally where I'd originally done some co-ops with Goodyear up in Akron, Ohio, and had traveled back and forth working in the race division, and did a lot of mechanical design work, adaptive mechanical design work, and manufacturing engineering. And then I came back and got on with a company here locally in Peachtree City, doing a lot of sustaining engineering work, kind of troubleshooting defective products, determining whether it's a manufacturing process or maybe it was a materials issue, a mold issue, or something like that. So whenever I actually got my degree, I'd had the experience going in interviews. People just see what's on the paper. And a lot of times when you look at what's on paper, you really don't get a good feel for what the candidate's like or the candidate's capabilities, right? Which is why a lot of us in management nowadays, we look out for, if we have colleagues or somebody that knows someone that can fill a role. That's kind of how a lot of people get transferred into roles nowadays is who and that connection to kind of get you into that interview. Yep. So that you get a little more context that way as far as what the candidate's like and what capabilities are outside of what you just read on the sheet.
Yep.
So there was a struggle with that because although I had the experience recently the degree, you're just a fresh out of college.
Right.
And so you come in entry level, even though I'd had 7 years experience or so. I was still coming in pretty much entry level and not really taking a step back, but not taking that next role. And so I had to adapt myself and quickly figure out, well, how can I accelerate my progression into the business world?
Yeah.
And how can I make this, because it's all about the story you tell, right? There's a reality of events that happen, and there's your interpretation of those events which creates your story. So it really was how can I take this and kind of leverage it and put myself where I want to be or where I need to be to be quote unquote successful. How do we define that?
No, that's good, Dave. Let's switch gears a bit, and we got Mr. KK in the house. Good to see you guys, he said. KK is our boy. He's probably smoking a cigar right now. Shout out to KK.
He probably is.
Let's do
Travel
this.
the world.
Yes. Tell the people in the chat and who's watching, what are you an expert at, Dave? I ask that question to everybody that comes on the show.
I know. I've watched a few of your podcasts. Man, it's tough because I don't really consider myself an expert at anything, and the reason I say that is because, to me, I believe that thinking of yourself as an expert in something almost allows the mind to become complacent, right? So I don't want to stunt my growth in any area. And so if I consider myself an expert in something, well, then I might not need to focus on that. I need to focus on something else, right? Well, the reality is I believe that we should always be focused on personal growth. And, just because I've got an MBA and an undergrad and a bachelor's doesn't mean that I'm done growing. There's a lot more we have to learn as professionals, and especially in the corporate world. So I wouldn't necessarily say I'm an expert in anything. If you were to ask colleagues of mine or people that have worked with me, they would probably say that I'm the expert at execution. I've been an engineer. We develop a very systematic approach to problem solving and how we take on tasks. So, with my experience in project management, I've kind of developed my own systematic approaches, and I would say that they would probably say I'm an expert at executing projects and ensuring successful implementation of it.
Good, very good. And you talking about you're in project management right now, working for AFT. What led you into the career as a project manager?
Accident.
And explain that. Because one of the things, right? And I asked this question just to see a lot of it, right? We have plans in life of what we want to do, where we want to go, and things like that, right? Like my undergrad was, focus on, I had to do information systems because I know that that's kind of where the market was going, learning about
Right.
computers and systems and things like that. And I knew coming out of undergrad that I was going to, obviously work in a software industry, and that's where I ended up, being. So, what led you into the project management career that you're in right now?
Well, we could take a step back and go into engineering, and I've pretty much known since I was a child that I was going to be an engineer.
Mm,
It started from taking the remote apart, putting it back together. Anything I could find around the house that I could take apart, I would put back together.
yep.
Once I got old enough to drive, it was the car that I had, I would take it apart, put it back together, and it was so that's kind of I always knew I was going to be some form of an engineer
Mm,
because it's just what I did naturally. Math and science were always kind of uh, things I kind of gravitated towards. Uh, I ended up through this first job that I had doing a lot of work in pulp and paper, and through that, when I was in school, it got to a point where there were some elective classes I had to take, and nothing really sounded like I was the kind of student where I was taking my time, so I wanted to actually take a class that I enjoyed, and so I gravitated them chemical recovery and those kind of things that were more specialized classes that were offered as electives, and I needed the credit, so I took those classes.
mm-hmm.
And then from that, it kind of gravitated towards, you know, getting, I already had a background in pulp and paper, so it was easy to get a job in pulp and paper. And then you realize, oh, pulp and paper it's not a sexy industry by any means. Right? Like, it's not the next iPhone. It's not consumer products. Like, you really don't get to wine and dine people or like go, to Vegas. You can go to Vegas for some conferences, but you really don't there's nothing sexy in it.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's an industry that's very stable and it pays really well. So, I got into that, and then over the years, I got tired of doing design. You can only do so many CAD drawings, and you're over. Right? You can only do, and I say love that, and I appreciate them because I do still love that. But for me, I needed something different. I wanted to gravitate away from that. Project execution and project management was
Mhm.
and it was something that just came pretty easy. So I kind of moved towards that.
Yep.
And I've been in it, since the role that I'm in now was. I actually thank Mr. Curtis Lane for that role. He's the one that got me the job, which goes back to it really, your pedigree and your degrees on the wall they're good to get the knowledge, but
Right.
having that contact is really what gets you in the door on a lot of these jobs.
Wow. Well,
And it was a startup. It was a startup role, startup division that this company was doing, and they needed someone to kind of oversee the execution of these projects. And that's kind of where I fell into place. So,
well. So, Dave, let me make sure I heard that right. Did you say Curtis helped you with that role?
Curtis came to me one day. It was at Georgia Tech. He came to me and he said, "We're both in pulp and paper."
Mm-hmm.
And we're both from Macon, so he and I we just instantly clicked, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just it's like family, right? And so he says, I see he says here,
Curtis said, "I didn't get you the job. Your pedigree got you the job. Well deserved." No,
no, but
and sorry, Dave. The reason why I asked that question because I thought I heard you say that, but also to to have you answer that question, but also talk about the network, and that's where you were going. So yeah, carry on, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I would say 90% of success, maybe not 90, maybe closer to 70, 75% of success in corporate America is going to be your network, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
it really comes down to, Curtis knew I was in pulp and paper. He knew I was looking for a job. He knew I was looking for something different. And, the job it came across his plate. And if I remember correctly, he could probably correct me, but if I remember correctly, it was too much travel for him. And his wife and family didn't want him traveling that much. So he said, "Hey, I know this guy that would be, you know, a great opportunity." And so he connected me with the company, and we interviewed a couple times, and so I mean that's how corporate America works, right?
mm.
And that's how a lot of us get to where we are in corporate America, because the reality is there's only so many positions to be filled,
Yep.
and people, especially executives, they want to work with people that they trust and that they know. And what's the best place to find people that you trust and you know?
Yeah.
Through other people that you trust and you know, right?
Mm, mm. That's deep, brother. Absolutely.
That's it's. They don't call it the good old boy world for nothing. I mean, in Georgia we call it the good old boy world, but it's it's been called the boys clubs for a while, and
Yep.
a lot of that, people want to work with who they can trust and they know, and you find those people through other people you trust and you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the power of the network that I'm talking about, guys. I think Dave did a really good job of summing that up. Is um, corporate America, I look at it this: it's about competition. Dave mentioned that there's only a certain amount of jobs that are out there, right? And people are going to put other people in those positions. A lot of the times, based on the people who they can trust, right, and people who can do the job. So, networking is very, very critical to climbing the ladder in corporate America, or just having any sort of success. I think in previous podcasts, you had Mr. Darcelis Reed say the same thing, Mrs. Tiffany Nolan. Just about every single person who's been on this podcast has really talked about the power of the network, and Mr. Billy Rowe last week as well too. So there's it's very important into networking and using your network throughout your career. So let's do this, Dave. I want to ask you about Black Heights and what's your
Okay.
thoughts on what Black Heights is doing.
I mean, I think it's great. The initiative that you have is something that I think a lot of corporate America lacks.
Hmm.
Uh, Keeping corporate America, politically correctness. There's a
Yep.
lot of, well, we can't do this, we have to do this. And ultimately, everything in corporate America comes down to bottom dollar, right? It's all about
Hmm.
profitability.
Yep.
And a lot of time, I think this kind of program I consider more of a mentorship for people that are coming, the young professionals coming into the world, and it's not just African Americans. It's it can be Asian Americans, it can be white professionals. It's really something that I think is fundamentally missed in the education portion.
Mm.
That when you're in college and you're busy studying the theories and you're busy you know focusing on your test and getting to that achievement of being the valedictorian at the top of the class, at the top 5% or whatever, you fundamental aspect of what it's like to really grow professionally. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of the young people coming into corporate America assume that because they have a degree from a prestigious university, that that's going to get them where they need to be. But the reality is that Georgia Tech just had their commencement, and that's another what 3,600 students that are out in the workforce
Yep.
with degrees from a prestigious university.
Yep.
You look at some of the executive programs; they're putting out 200, executives, graduate degree people every year.
Yep.
And that's just one university. So you look at how the numbers exponentially are growing of people in the workforce that are completely capable, and you pull aside, if you assume all factors are the same in regards to race, sex, gender, and that, then you look at going into a role. If everyone was just like you still have a lot of competition for that role.
Yep.
So the question then becomes, how do you prepare? And I think a lot of that comes from, what questions are you asking? What network are you building?
Yep.
And these are the kind of things that I think Black Heights answers. These are the questions that, someone that's 25 coming out of grad school, or 22 coming out of undergrad, can prepare early on, so that when they're 29, 30, 31, that they can be in those roles and fill those roles, because they've already been prepared and they already know what to expect, and they already have everything there. And there was I don't know if they still do it. When I was early on, there were things called career development plans.
Yep.
And you would sit down with a mentor and come up with your career development plan, and he would say, or she would say, hey, where do you want to be in 5 years? Okay, well, you want to be here. You're here. Here are the steps you need to do to get you.
Right.
And I would imagine they still do that. But to what level, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
And I think those are the questions that really truly need to be answered, and that's what I think Black Heights is capable of answering those questions, and helping people understand what their career development plan is, and formulating that for themselves, and preparing themselves in the forefront, because it doesn't just end with your degree. Your education is ongoing.
Absolutely.
And any executive will tell you that even if you're a CEO, you're still going every day, and you're learning something new about some process or something, because the market's constantly changing.
Absolutely. That's a great answer, Dave. We found ourselves on training, coaching, and exposure to top level executives, and you think about it, when you're going through that with other people who are like you, face the same challenge with you, it builds a network, right? And not only that, the exposure to the podcast that we're doing right here, it continues to build a network, right? So a huge component of Black Heights is about the network as well, right? The training and the coaching, we teach situational leadership skills, the model, right, where there's no right way to be a leader, right? But it's based on the actual situation, the person's performance level, their assessment, right? And the different models that you can use to really lead people who are different, because everyone is different, right? For instance, right, if you are a manager and you have someone on your team who just started, there's a more directive approach that you have to give that person, versus saying, you know what, I'm just going to delegate. Because if you delegate, you're setting yourself up for failure, and you're setting that person up for failure. So that's why, we teach the situational leadership model, as long with other management tools. But you're absolutely right, Dave. The mentorship, the coaching, the networking, the exposure. You talked about Black Heights. You talked about a little bit diversity. Let's talk about what your experience is like, and this is what I ask a lot of the African Americans that are on my show. What's your experience like as a white man in corporate America?
I think we a little bit early. I was kind of behind the 8 ball when I got into corporate America. I think white or African American or Asian American, Hispanic, my experience, I feel, it's been pretty standard, in the sense of, I have faced a lot of struggles. I've reached a lot of points where I've interviewed for roles and didn't get the role. And when I look back at how that interview went and the questions that were asked, I realized I wasn't prepared for the role. Not that I couldn't do the functional part of the job, but I wasn't prepared for that role. And I think that regardless of your demographic, it comes down to you have to be prepared. I have gone into job interviews, which when you look on paper, I should have a job interview. But you look at it and you say, well, okay, I didn't get this role. Why did I not get this role? And more importantly, which I think a lot of young professionals do not do, is when you don't get the job, the follow-up, right? Because I want to know, why did I not? What was I lacking that the other person?
Wow.
And so, I think because we can have accomplishments in everything we do, but we don't really grow from our accomplishments or grow from our failures and really understanding how to improve based on those failures. So, I think my experience as a white man in corporate America is the experience as any man in corporate America. Some things I'm prepared for, some things I'm not prepared for. And when I'm prepared, I excel. When I'm not prepared, I miss the ball.
So learning from missed opportunities.
I think it's critical to understand why you didn't achieve a certain metric, because everything's metric based, right?
Yep. No, that's a good answer, Dave. You talked about preparation, and it looks like we got Mr. Curtis chatting in here as well. And Curtis, I'm gonna get to your question. I want Dave to kind of talk about the importance of preparation. Talk about what preparation means. I think at one point in time, you and I got in a conversation about my IDP, which is my individual development plan, and you were talking about your vision board. Tell everyone what a vision board is and how you prepare for your career success and your professional or personal life.
So I'm a little old school. Your development plan is probably really nice. It's in a PDF or Word doc when you're all done. It's there. Yep. It's great, right? I love it. But I'm a little old school. So there's an aspect of me that in our home here, we run our life like a business. Right? My wife and I we're chairman of the board. Our decisions are made together, but at the same time, we evaluate all sources of income as revenue, just as any executive board would or any company. So what we do is, and I look at my corporate job and I say, okay, well, my corporate job is one source of revenue, but if you're in a sales role, for instance, and you have some sort of incentive step or performance step where you get a bonus at the end of the year, well, if you don't meet that bonus, what happens?
Right.
Your home is short that percentage of income, right? So what would a business do if a client of theirs didn't give them the income that they had promised or they had expected? You have to find new avenues and sources of income.
Right.
So what we like to do is, and I'm a little behind. I've been traveling a lot the last quarter here, so but it's winding down. But usually we like to do it around Thanksgiving in November sometime. But we're going to do it over the Christmas break this year. But we have a coach that we call, and we have a call with I think tomorrow, Thursday. But what we do is we sit down in the fourth quarter of each year, and we review our vision board. And what a vision board is, it's very simple. It's very, very, very simple. We take, and sometimes I'll do it in one of the electronic formats, whether it's PowerPoint or whatever it is on Apple that I use, whatever that program. But sometimes I go old school and I get a piece of poster board and magazines and I go through and I think about what I really want to achieve that year, and I'll physically glue it out, cut it out, and glue it onto this poster board, and it's there. And for us, it serves as an accountability metric
Mm.
because without having it's like a budget for your finance. Without having a plan of what you're going to do for the coming year, you have no focus as to where to put your efforts.
Mm.
You have no way to prepare for what you're going to do, right? So, for instance, we have an investment property that we bought this year, and our focus is to renovate that property and get it rented out in 2019. We're going to start the renovation sometime in the spring. So we're going through everything, and I realize I'm going to pay 25% to a contractor, or I can get my general contractor's license, and I can save that 25%, which then comes into our pocket and our household as revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we go through the whole year, and it's all aspects of your life. It's spiritual, it's professional, it's financial, it's health, it's physical. I mean, it's everything you can think of, right? And you break it down, and you just put down the cheat. Whether it's I want to try, like for this year, my big thing is I wanted to travel.
Yeah.
I turned 40 this year, so I got my 40th birthday trip, knocked it out, knocked off my vision. So next year, what I'll do is I'll look at my vision board and I'll see what did I not accomplish. Why did I not accomplish? What was it? Something that maybe I didn't set aside enough money to do, or maybe something that required a certification or some sort of training or education that I didn't get that I should have had.
Yeah.
So we look at all these things and we create this vision board, which for you is a development plan. And it really kind of helps us focus throughout the year because we see this every day. We see it every week. It's there for us to look at. It's tangible. And it really helps us focus. Before we go spend, money on a fancy dinner, or before we go, blow money on Jordans or shoes or whatever we want to buy, right? Is that part of our vision plan? Is there something bigger that we should be focusing on that really helps us prepare? And it really puts a lot into perspective, and it focuses and channels a lot of your energy, because now it's now you're treating every day. You wake up with that purpose, and you know exactly what your purpose is, right?
Yep.
And this is something that I think is very applicable in any profession you do.
Wow. That's a good answer. That's having a plan, Dave. You aren't going anywhere without having a plan, right? A plan and a vision is just like knowing the directions or having a navigation to your destination, right?
And here's the secret, Antoine.
Mm-hmm.
That's what corporate America wants.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
I want as many people working for me that don't have a plan. They just want to come in and do the work, because guess what? They're always going to be there to do the work.
Yep. Absolutely. We have 2 questions in the chat, Mr. Evans. Mr. Curtis Lane says, similar question to what I asked Tiffany relative to diversity. With the efforts companies are making to attract more diverse candidates, do you feel this puts you at a disadvantage as a white male? Sorry. Companies are, spending a lot of money on diversities. I think a lot of corporations now have a chief diversity officer. I have an opinion about whether that's the right way to go. I think it is, personally. How companies have it structured where there's no tie-in to CEOs, I don't think it really solves the diversity problem. But certainly give your your feedback as being a white male and companies investing heavily on things like diversity initiatives. I can tell you one thing. Intel said, in 2015, they were going to be spending up to $300 million on the diversity initiatives over the next 3 years, so $100 million a year, right? So, I got companies like Google who are doing the same thing. How How do you feel as a white male? Do you feel disadvantaged?
I do not feel disadvantaged, and it's for me. It's very simple. Diversity to me is in no regard limited to your race or your gender.
Mm.
Diversity is a mental state for me.
Mm.
I think that a lot of these companies that invest heavily into diversity, you have to take into context how that company is growing. We're in a global market, right? So if I'm wanting to expand into India or wanting to expand into China or wanting to expand into Africa, there's angles in diversity that I have to be competitive in those markets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I think for here in the U.S., we're a melting pot for diversity anyway.
Yep.
I think it really comes down to there's only so many roles, and I have to be prepared for whatever role I want to get, right? And that means who's in my circle, right? I'm sure you're familiar with Jim Rohn,
Yeah.
one of the late great speakers. Jim Rohn said you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So the question then begins: who's in your circle? Right? Like, let's really about who we, right? Because if I'm investing my time and I want to be in a certain spot, but my sphere of influence or my sphere of people that I'm associating with is in no way associated or targeted towards that goal,
Right.
then I'm never going to reach that goal. So when we talk about diversity, if you're a young African American professional in corporate America and you're wanting to get to a certain role, I would say look at the people that are in those roles.
Right. Yep.
And it's as simple as, and a lot of corporate America have flex work schedules, right? I mean, it's very common nowadays. Some do the telemarketing, whatever. But reach out to someone in those roles, especially someone that's not like you. I know a lot of times in America we do what I call self-segregation. Because it's comfortable, it's our network. We get the accolades and we get the appreciations that we want, but we don't really grow because we're not challenged.
Yeah.
So I really would say,
that's America in general, Dave. Yes.
It's America in general.
Yep.
I would say, reach out to someone that's in that role that you want to be in, that's not like you, and say, hey, could I just trouble you for 30 minutes during lunch, or could I trouble you for 15 minutes with coffee? And I just want to understand better what you do and how I can maybe, I'm interested in what you do and one day hope to get to where you're at. Maybe there's something that I can take from that and prepare myself to be in that role. Now, here's the key, though. If you ask someone for an hour of their time or 30 minutes of their time, you have to be respectful of that hour.
Yeah.
And it's not just with regards to running over the hour. You have to come with questions, because it's specific questions of things you want to know. Because if someone asks me to lunch and they want to talk about something for an hour, I'm more than welcome to be there. But at the same time, I'm not just going to dump everything I know.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And you got to understand, right? So I think for young professionals, it's important to really have an understanding of what you want to get out of that meeting. Come with questions, because the people that are going to be there for you are going to answer your questions, but they're not just going to tell you everything, because where do you start?
Right. Be prepared. That's about being prepared, man. Yep.
It's all about being prepared.
Yep. No, it's true. And not only that, though, Dave, is the concept of emulation, right? And you said something to the fact of the 5 people that you hang around or you spend most time with, or the 5 people you pretty much become, right? You become like them because you're emulating the things that they do, and they emulate the things that you do, right? So if you want to become like someone, then you have to emulate the behaviors of that person, and that's not changing yourself. That's just emulating the positive behaviors of what that person brings to the table. And a lot of it is around skill and professionalism and the ability to communicate. Let's talk about this, Dave. I want to get into some soft subjects. And guys, thank you so much in the chat, Tiffany. Yes, Dave did touch on that diversity subject.
Glad I could answer that question.
Absolutely. And let's talk about this, right? You are a Jordan shoe collector. So Curtis told me that I have that bring that up. So tell everyone why did you become a Jordan shoe collector, and what was your last pair that you bought?
Well, first off, I no longer claim to be a collector because I've become frustrated with the policies of Nike and corporate America and how they're really like. It used to be a lot of fun. Like we used to stand in line for hours. Like you get there at 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, you'd wait till 8 a.m. You get your shoes, wonderful. It was like the culture, right? It's part of being in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up watching Jordan play. I mean, I remember the very first pair that I bought was a pair of Jordan 4s. I mean, that's the kind of like, so for me, it actually happened that I was in the store one day and I saw a pair and I did a double take and I was like, wait a minute, I used to have that pair of shoes. And the guy goes, oh yeah, they started doing these like re-releases, or they call them retros.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, well, it's kind of like that whole nostalgia thing, right? So I have a large shoe. I wear size 15, so it's a little bit larger than most average people, but not so much anymore. So when I was younger, it was really hard to find shoes, especially having a single mom that would pay that much for shoes. So I had the mentality of when I get old enough and I have some spare money, if I see something that fits, I'm just going to buy it. I can figure out the occasion to wear it at some time, right? So it's my love for shoes is a lot deeper than just Air Jordans. I mean, I have, I think the last time I counted, I probably have 115 pair of Jordans.
Wow.
But the reality is, I'm a professional man, and in my day-to-day work, I'm usually wearing steel toes. So I really don't get to wear them that often. So I might have 4 or 5 pair that I wear. Most of them are still unworn in the box.
Yep.
And I've thought about, maybe selling some off to make some more room. Lately, I've kind of got into cowboy boots, which is another whole other randomness. But yeah, I have a love for shoes. It's kind of like, some people like to watch movies.
Yep.
If I'm having a bad day, I like to sometimes I'll sit in the closet, put them on, and it's just kind of like everything goes away, right? Just forget everything.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like it's just there's that comfort level there.
Yep.
So
very
that's,
cool.
That's. But I haven't. The last pair I bought's probably been. The last one, I bought a couple of different shoes online, but I really stood in line for was. There was a Dornbacher 3 that came out in 2010, and I waited in line for 9 hours, and I got there, and I was the only person in line with a size 15, and they had 3 pairs of 15s, so I bought all 3 pairs of 15s. That was,
So I'm assuming you sold the other 2, right?
No, I sold 1 pair. I still have one that's unworn, and then I got a pair that I wear. But
only you, Dave. Only you, man. That's what's up, brother. So
diversity. It's all about diversity.
Yeah, that's a lot of diversity with over 115 pairs of Jordans, man. Wow. Let's talk about you being a soap maker. I found that interesting about you. So David and I obviously went to school together at Georgia Tech, and I just remember one day in class, I see Dave walking, and I didn't know Dave that well at that point in time. It was early on in our, school semester, and I see him have a bag in his hand, and it looked like it was cheese. So I had to ask him. I was like, "Why are you carrying cheese in the bag, right?" And then he tells me that it's soap, and he has me smell all all kinds. I think there was a charcoal, I think there was a lavender, I think there was a lemongrass, and
Yeah, there was soap bars.
yeah, and then next thing you know, I'm buying soap from Dave. So Dave, tell tell people that how you've started making soap. Is it a hobby of yours or a passion, and what you're looking to do with it next?
So first of all, it goes back to you can do anything that you put your mind to doing, right?
Yeah. Mm.
Uh, I I like bar soap. I'm a traditional person. I don't like shower gels. I'm not one of these like little what do they call them, spongy spoofy thing. I'm 6'4", 6'5". I like just having a bar of soap. Well, your traditional bars of soap are 3.5 ounces, right? So your Dials, your Doves, your whatever, it's like 3.5 ounce bars of soaps.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a little OCD in the aspect of like summertime. I could take 4 showers in a day in the summer, So I mean, I mean, in 2 days a soap bar of soap's gone.
Yeah.
So I got to this point where I wanted. I have a heart issue, so I was cardiologist was doing a lecture, and I was listening, and he was talking about it. Being healthy is not really just what you put in your body, but what you put on your body.
Mm.
And so he showed at the time he showed like a shampoo bottle with different chemicals, and he was like, "Do you know what these chemicals are?" He was like, "Exactly, you don't." He was like, "It starts with understanding the things that are on your body." And so I started thinking about, I knew there was organic soap companies, and I'd gone to a couple, started looking for some bars of soap, and it was all, rose petal this or this. It was sweet, it was smelly, it was, and I remember I met a lady at a farmer's market here in Grant Park in Atlanta. And I said to her, I was like, do you have anything that's just a clean scent? Like just simple, like, and she was like, I don't really understand what you're saying. They're all clean with soap. And I go, well, no, I said, imagine just taking a stroll through the forest in like summertime, right? Like the flower, like just like the pine, it's like this clean scent. She was like, no. She's like, but here's a business card. So I sent her a thing and I said, hey, this is what I want. Very simple. Make something like this, like a lemongrass. I'll just buy what you make. Right? She goes, no, 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 no. Let's start a Facebook discussion. I'm not on Facebook. I was like, you know what? Look, it's ridiculous. I'm an engineer. How hard can it be?
Yep.
So I did some research, bought some necessary equipment, started, and originally I just made it for me, but it came out the way it came out when I got all the ingredients. I had to buy bulk of a certain ingredient. So it came out that I could make like 98 batches.
Mm.
Well, you figure 18 bars, 98 batches is a lot of soap. So
Yep.
I started just kind of experimenting things that I liked. It was a hobby, and then people started enjoying the scents. And when I met you, it was uh, that was the first part of the semester and the teams, and it was kind of like this is something a way for me to show the team kind of a part of me that's not business side,
Mm.
because it goes back to that whole you got to be interested to be interesting, right?
Yep.
Like people don't want to just do business with someone that does business all the time. Like you have to have some sort of hobby or something that makes you worth engaging in outside of business.
Mm. Mm.
So I did that, and I started making soap, and people enjoyed it, and they wanted to purchase it, and so I started making more, and then so I've looked at how to make that an actual business. I'm doing a lot of study as far as the FDA, and it's technically a cosmetic, but not really a cosmetic, and so how how do you get it approved to the FDA, and looking at maybe creating that into an Amazon fulfillment business. Those are the areas I'm in now, but I'm not a marketing person. I'm branding is definitely not something that I'm constant. It's not something I can do. So
Mm.
I save that kind of table.
Mm.
But I've got all the backside done. So now it's just a matter of getting back into it, creating inventory, which I've started. I just had 4 to 5 weeks for the curing of it. But Trust me. Send me your address. You'll have a whole batch coming to you.
I'll make sure I do that. I'll make sure I do that. We got one more a chat in here, and we're going to start to wrap this up. So, Mrs. Tamara Wade, my sister, says, Dave, you seem like a very busy guy. What is a typical day for you like? And give a short and sweet answer on this one, Dave. We're going to wrap up.
Typical day is corporate America. Pretty much, I get up pretty early. Sometimes I get up early, not always, but get up early. I'll deal with some conference calls for the company side in Finland. They're wrapping up their day, so we normally have some conference calls, and then I'll do whatever's on my plate for the day for corporate America and get it kind of done and knocked out. And then afterwards, I'll get with the wife. If there's any real estate stuff that needs to be done, I handle that. As far as I deal more with the investment side and kind of that aspect of the real estate, and then we spend a couple quality hours over dinner. We kind of no electronics. We focus on each other and kind of the marriage and the relationship and building that. And then after dinner she goes back and does some work, and I might do some soap stuff, or I might do some more real estate stuff, or just whatever's on the docket of whatever needs to be accomplished. You just keep doing it. I think when we talk about a typical day, I think it's important to really understand that when you're a professional in all aspects of your life, there really is no weekend, right? You don't say, man, I'm looking forward to Friday, because you're going to work on Friday too. You're going to work on Saturday too. And the reality is when you enjoy what you're doing, it's not like you're looking forward to the weekend, because you're just saying, what do I have to accomplish? What do I need to accomplish? Like,
right.
What's my next objective, and how do I achieve it? How do I grow? And so that's really it. That's a typical day.
Enjoy what you do, guys, and it doesn't feel like work. And I'm just realizing that now with the formation and starting Black Heights. It's something that I can do every day, whether it's an article that I can write, or there's a contact, or there's a scheduling of a podcast. There's always something, and I must say it doesn't feel like work. So even on the weekends, I'm doing it. It's it's having a passion for what you're doing and what you're creating. And I think Curtis said the same thing when he talked about the business that he started, the Margarita Man, and it's you have a passion behind it, and it's something that you love, and you constantly work at it. So Dave, for someone that's going to watch this podcast and listen to the message, right, or listen to part of it, what are 3 key takeaways that you want them to take away from this message from you?
I think the first would be that diversity is not limited to race or gender. Diversity is a mindset, and only you can control how diverse your life is. You can control the opportunities that you have. I think the other one is your network. You can never say too much about your network, right? Look at your network. Take a really deep look at your network, who you're associating with. Are you going out for happy hour on a Thursday or Friday night with the girlfriends? And are those girlfriends all bitching about their job? Or are you going out and you're meeting people that, are looking forward to new opportunities and new adventures? That's it really change how you develop your network. And then presence. I mean, leadership it's not limited to corporate executives.
Yeah.
We all have a presence in our professional, in our corporate job roles, and looking at that presence and saying, what is my presence? I mean, what is it that, whether it's what's my vision? How do I communicate that vision? How do I, more importantly, listen to those around me that might be critics of my vision? because that's how we learn how to adapt. It goes back to customer discovery. We learned in class. We talk about the presence that we have, or you have as an executive presence, or the presence that you have. Everyone around you is constantly judging you, right? And everyone around you is going to make a determination or decision about you when you're not around.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And how you carry yourself, and it's appearance, it's communication, it's your network, it's how you present your vision. All of that comes into your presence, and if you focus on that, and you focus on your network, and you really kind of change, I say change your mindset as far as diversity goes. I think those are three things that I would take away from this, and really kind of would help you grow as a person, not only professionally but also personally.
Well, very good takeaways, Dave. Let me recap that. Diversity in Dave's mind is not related to a race or a gender, right? It's a mindset. Diversity is differences in life. The power of the network, right? If you want to be somewhere, you have to rub shoulders with people that are where you want to be, right? And then, have a presence. Be a professional. And part of being a professional is being a person that others want to be around and bringing something to the table when you are around. I'll take a couple of things away, Dave, that I want to talk about that you punched on that I wrote down. And one was corporate America is about your network. You talked about being prepared, and when you aren't prepared, sometimes there are missed opportunities. But when you do have missed opportunities, follow up. Understand what it was that you missed. What was it that you wasn't prepared for? Have a plan. Have a plan. You mentioned your vision board. I'm your vision board. I mentioned my individual development plan that just went out. So, folks who are on the newsletter, you got an email about an individual development plan, and that's a good way for you to really map out your personal and career goals. And it's really that vision in helping you create that vision. I personally wrote it myself, so
Nice.
it's a little bit easier, and it is a pretty good
Did I
read.
get a copy of that?
You gotta pay for it, brother. It's $3.99. Black Heights website.
I'll pay for that.
And also, Dave, one thing that you said, right? You talked about soap, right? And one of the things I heard you say clearly was, "I'm not good at marketing." What I took from that statement was, you know what your strengths are, and you also know what your weaknesses are. You have to know what your weaknesses are in order for you to move forward. So, for instance, whenever
Agreed.
whenever you decide to go further with the soap, you know that you need help with marketing. You can create opportunities for yourself to leverage your strengths and to leverage somebody else's strengths to help you out with marketing. So it's knowing what your strengths and your weaknesses, and all that is part of the individual development plan that I created. And I'm sure that's part of Dave's vision board as well. Well, I want to say this. I thought this was a wonderful podcast. Thank you so much, viewers, for spending your time with us tonight. I hope we didn't keep you too long. I hope you had some cocktails in your hand and enjoyed the message from Mr. Dave Evans. I think this was a wonderful message and a wonderful podcast. Thank you so much for all the support. If you guys are watching live, please like the video, please subscribe, and we will be with you guys later. So until then, you guys have a good night, and we will see you guys soon. Dave, thank you so much, sir. Tell Becky, thank you so much for the time. Absolutely.